Anyway, thank you all for being here tonight, for taking time out of your presumably busy schedules to learn with us tonight. Before we get started, just indulge me in sharing a little bit about this Let There Be Light Menorah project. As you will learn over the next hour and perhaps in the second session as well, the 7-branched menorah is the most enduring symbol of the Jewish people. It's what we know. It's what everybody knows to be a Jewish symbol. Our beautiful Berenger Sanctuary is filled with extraordinary symbols of our traditions and history. We have our windows and our 10 commandments, the Jerusalem stone on our bima, and many other features. Even if you look up at the dome, you'll see just a scant differentiation in color to see that there are Jewish stars surrounding each of the fixtures up top. Very, very interesting. And we have a lot of people to thank for that. So we don't have a menorah, and sanctuaries are typically dedicated with a menorah. So to continue beautifying our sanctuary, we've embarked on this effort to create our very own uniquely designed glass mosaic tile representations of the Ben Shahn menorah, as you have all seen in our electronic and print collateral. Rabbi Weinberg grew up with a Haggadah, the Ben Shahn Haggadah. This was the artwork that was on the Haggadah he used growing up, and he was always in love with it. And so when the opportunity presented itself for us to add artwork to our sanctuary, here we are. The project serves multiple purposes, as I'm sure you can imagine. The first and most important is that this type of program was designed to bring our community together with things like tonight, these sessions, these learning sessions throughout the year. We started off with some sessions for our religious school that Talia spearheaded with some very, very capable educators in our community who did a terrific job. The second is we are going to have something really special to look forward to when we can put together a socially safe dedication in our sanctuary. So we can see these menorahs on the walls of our sanctuary. They are going to be above the pews where the Kolrina choir sits and where the Torah readers sit on either side of the bima. The second is that this endeavor is our most significant fundraiser for this year and last. We didn't have a significant fundraiser last year. And as you know, the synagogue needs us and needs our support. The program was designed so that everybody who is able can participate in some way. Now, these education sessions are open to everybody, but we hope that you'll be able to make a meaningful contribution to the project itself. We recognize every dollar you part with is voluntary, and we appreciate every $1 that you do decide to share with the shul and support the shul's effort. I want to recognize the members of the committee, Julia Kaufman, Debbie Rajanoff, Jeanette Pincus, and Nancy Stanley, and of course our very own Talia Kushnick, from whom you'll be learning with tonight. These women have worked tirelessly to put this project together over the last 6 months, and over the next 6 months or so, we're working hard to make sure that we get the word out about this project. And we're all about to learn from Talia. We know she's a wonderful teacher, and we appreciate her taking the time to share her brilliance with us for the next 45 or so minutes. If anybody has any questions about the participation in this project, please feel free to reach out to me. I will be egotistical enough to assume that you all know how to find me if you need to, through cell phone or email. And I would love to talk to each one of you. And I also want to acknowledge that so many people have participated in this project in an extraordinary way. And I want to thank you all. From the bottom of my heart and on behalf of the synagogue leadership, thank you very, very much. And with that, I will push it over to Talia.
Thank you, Marcy. I want to start off before we really dive into anything, just saying how honored I am to be a part of this program, to be working on this committee with these women. It's really been really fun to be part of something like this, and it's really an honor for me to be having this opportunity to learn with you and be speaking to you tonight. One of the things that I really value, and one of the opportunities that I've had through this program and my role in this program, is that I've gotten to take something, a symbol in our tradition that's just kind of everywhere, that, I personally have taken for granted. The menorah, we're so familiar with it. And I've gotten to learn about it on a deeper level. And to me, that's always really exciting, to take parts of our tradition that we maybe take for granted or just see all the time and really take it face value, and then be able to uncover different pieces of them and learn more about them. So that's been a really exciting part for me. And I'm looking forward to sharing that with you. And I hope that you get as much out of it as I have. So like I was saying, the menorah is, a very familiar object in our tradition, but I just want to take a minute to clarify what it is exactly that we're talking about here. So let's look at this image that we have here in front of us. On the left-hand side, you can see a 7-branched menorah. This is the biblical menorah that we're first introduced to when God is telling Moshe what objects should be in the tabernacle. And Moshe gets the description of this 7-branched menorah, and it's built and put in the tabernacle. It's then carried with the Israelites through the desert, and then ends up being in both the first and second temple. On the right, we have the Chanukiah, the Hanukkah menorah. So these are both menorahs in that they're both candelabras. And when we're talking about the Chanukiah, we tend to use the word Chanukiah and menorah interchangeably. They're both accurate, but the Chanukiah, as we know, has 9 branches, the 8 stems for the 8 days, and then the shamash, while the biblical menorah has 7 branches. So we at Anshai Torah are very lucky that we already have a beautiful Chanukiah outside our sanctuary that we joined together just not long ago. It feels like forever ago, but it really wasn't a long time ago, when we were lighting the Chanukiah outside as a community on the 8 nights of Hanukkah. And we're lucky we already have a beautiful Chanukiah. Now we're going to be adding these 2 menorahs to our sanctuary. So we should count ourselves as very lucky, because we're going to have both things in our shul. So like I was saying, we are first introduced to the menorah in the book of Exodus, when God gives a very, very long, detailed description of what the menorah should look like. When you look at it, and I will share it in a minute and you'll be able to see it, it's so long and it's so detailed that, at least for me, when I read it, I kind of get lost in reading it. Like my mind can't follow it. And I'm not the only one. Dr. Stephen Fine, who's considered kind of the preeminent scholar of the menorah, he has this exercise that he does with his doctoral students, where he has them read this description from the Torah and has them try to draw it. And in his book, The Menorah, he talks about kind of the reactions of some of his students to this exercise, and how they're frustrated, or they're laughing, or they just, it just becomes like mayhem, them trying to figure out how to actually draw this. So we have me, who gets confused by it. We have Dr. Fine's students who gets confused by it. And then also Moshe is confused by it. So when God is giving him the directive of how to build it and what it should look like, Moshe is just baffled by it. He really can't visualize it. He can't conceptualize it. He can't build it. And he has to enlist the help of the artist Bezalel to build it. Somebody who thinks artistically, and who can do it for him. So let's look together at this description. So we're not going to read it all, but as you can see, it's long, and It's very detailed, and if you skim over it at some point, you can see what I'm talking about, because not only does it have so many descriptive pieces to it, but it's very, very specific. A certain kind of flower and a certain kind of blossom, and where they should be and how they should attach to each other. And this, it has sparked centuries of debate about what the menorah actually looked like. And there are, lots of different versions if you were to, Google it or go through to see the way that people interpret this. But basically every piece of the description has been interpreted and reinterpreted, imagined and reimagined throughout our history. But there is one part that is very, very clear and very, very specific. And that is verse 37, where it says, "And thou shalt make the lamps thereof 7." So we have this one clear piece, one thing that is not up for debate at all. There need to be 7 branches on this menorah. Okay, so if we're thinking about this description, where so much of it is kind of, really out there, really, imaginative. What is it about the number 7 and this specific piece of the description that is just totally non-negotiable? We can't think about it. We can't interpret it. We can't do anything differently with it because we see that it needs to be 7 branches. So that is kind of our big question for tonight. What is it? Why the number 7? So in our tradition, in the Jewish tradition, like in many other traditions, there are numbers that have significance. We are going to be talking about the number 7, but I'm sure we can also all think about numbers in the Jewish tradition that have special meaning to them. We know that 18, Chai, that's one of them. There's actually something called gematria, which is where you assign a numerical value to every Hebrew letter. And people have been using that to kind of discover deeper meanings to our texts for centuries. So we definitely place a lot of value on the idea of numbers in our tradition. And the number 7 is particularly significant for us. So now I want to read a text that's going to talk a little bit about why the number 7. So I will read it. "Often we see the number 7 in reference to holy works of God. God creates the earth in 7 days. God commands the Israelites to make the 7th day of the week, Shabbat, a holy day filled with no working activities. 7 tends to represent something that is being finished or complete. Hence, God's creation was complete on the 7th day. It also tends to represent divine intervention." So here we have a number of reasons why the number 7 might have significance. And they're probably things that you could think of off the top of your head, right? We know that the world was created in 7 days. We know about Shabbat and how that's on the 7th day. And if we think about some of these other things that it signifies perfection, the tabernacle and then the temples afterwards were thought to be the place where God's presence dwelled. So of course it would be a place of perfection, and we would want all of the things inside of that to be perfect. So if 7 has this symbolism of being perfect, then of course, an article or something in the tabernacle or the temples would have that connotation and that significance. So that, makes sense to us. But I think there's even a deeper and richer tradition of the number 7 popping up in Jewish culture. Can anybody, if you either want to, write it in the chat or raise your hand, can anybody think of other things in our tradition that have to do with the number 7, places where we see the number 7 popping up? Aliyot, Gilda, exactly. Yes, on Shabbat, we have 7 aliyot, for sure. Marriage ceremony, yeah, Bonnie. I'm assuming you're talking about the Sheva Brachot, or you're talking about the 7 blessings. Yep. I'm looking for hands. You'll have to unmute yourself. Gwen and Richard, my in-laws, you want to unmute yourselves and tell me?
In farming.
In farming, what do you mean?
Every 7 years, you're supposed to leave the fields
Yep.
fallow.
Shemitah, yes, exactly. That's another one. The bris, 7 weeks of the Omer, yes. So the bris we have on the 8th day, but 7 weeks of the Omer, yes. So the 7 weeks in between Pesach and Shavuot. Circle a husband 7 times, yes. So that's another part of the wedding ceremony where the bride will traditionally walk around the groom 7 times. So here already, you guys are coming up with a really great list of how we see 7. Yep, Shabbat is the 7th day. So 7 is very, very prevalent in our tradition. I have some more that I want to share with you. You guys have said a lot of them already, but let's just look at some of these other ones. So we have the first verse of the Torah has 7 words, right? So Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. So there we have 7 words. We have here what you've said, Shabbat falls on the 7th day of the week, and 7 people are called to the Torah. So we have 7 aliyot on Shabbat. There are 7 laws called the Noahide laws that are in the Torah that apply to all of humanity. Passover, Pesach, and Sukkot are celebrated for 7 days in the Torah and then maintained in the land of Israel. When an immediate relative dies, Jews sit Shiva, which literally means 7, for 7 days. There are 7 major holidays in the Jewish year. So we have Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Hanukkah, Purim, Pesach, and Shavuot. What you said about the Jewish wedding, that we have the Sheva Brachot, we have the bride circling the groom 7 times. And then traditionally people might have 7 days of celebration after a wedding, which are also called Sheva Brachot. And in Israel, we have the 7 species that Israel is kind of known for, right? Wheat, barley, grapes, pomegranates, figs, olives, and dates. So some of you said things that are not in this list. So these were kind of just the highlights of where we see the number 7. But clearly there is a very, very strong precedent and a strong tradition of 7 being significant. And the menorah having 7 branches, symbolizing perfection, residing in the tabernacle and in the temples is another example of that. It kind of fits in, very, very nicely with this understanding. So, what we've talked about here have kind of been familiar aspects of our tradition that relate to the number 7, that relate to the menorah, but we also have some more abstract, maybe some deeper, maybe a little bit different understandings of the number 7 and how that can be related to the menorah. And so I want to share one of those with you now. And this was one that when I first came across it, I had never heard anything like this before. And I told the committee about it and they were really excited about it. And so I wanted to share it with you because I think it's just different and cool. And it kind of gives this other understanding of our Jewish tradition and maybe this historical lens, when we're putting ourselves maybe in the shoes of our ancestors and people who understood the world differently and took their understandings and the way that they were making sense of their world and their life and related it to our Jewish traditions that have kind of continued to follow us till today, and things that we might not necessarily be familiar with, but are really interesting and different. So I want to talk about a cosmic understanding of the number 7 and how that relates to the 7-branched menorah. So this next text is from Stephen Fine, who like I was saying before, is one of the preeminent scholars on the menorah, and he wrote this book called The Menorah, which is chock full of really interesting information. The history around this artifact is just really fascinating. And if you tune in next week for the people of the menorah, you'll get historical kind of look at how the menorah has been with us, since the beginning, and continues to be, very strong symbol that we use. So that was just my shameless plug for next week's session. But let's look at this. Let's look at this text together. So the biblical description of the tabernacle menorah is indeed difficult to conceptualize, right? We saw that. Each element of this complex artifact is open to interpretation, and attempts to visualize the original artifact can be perplexing. Philo in the 1st century, Josephus in the 1st century, and then the poet Yanai in the 5th century opted for an astrological interpretation. Ancients had a profound awareness that God is watching us from a distance. The menorah represents this connection. So when I first read this text, I was confused because it seems to be a number of different ideas here that he is putting into the menorah that I didn't necessarily see the connection. We have here the astrological interpretation, and we have this idea that God is watching us from a distance, and somehow those things are coming together in the menorah. So before we, look any closer, look at other texts that are going to kind of unpack this for us, does anybody have any guesses of where Fine was going with this cosmic understanding? You can feel free to put it in the chat or raise a hand. I will look through it. Are we stumped? Yeah, we're stumped. I mean, it's from this text, it's not clear what he's talking about. We just know, so from Bonnie, maybe the 7 days of the week. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely could be an answer. I think that might go more to the significance of the number 7 that we were talking about before, something that's a little bit more familiar and that we've seen. Planets, Gilda, look at you. So yes, we're going to get there. So let's move on to the next text because this is going to start to shed light. But I want to give Gilda wins. She definitely wins. So here we have, wait a second, I'm not there yet. So here we have the prophet Zechariah, and he was saying, Sheva Ela Enei Adonai Hema Mishtotatim B'chol Haaretz. These 7 are the eyes of God, which range through the whole earth. So we know that ancient civilizations studied astronomy and astrology, and they paid a lot of attention to the stars and the planets. And of course, they were always relating these things to their lives, to their worldview, to their religious beliefs. And if you think about it, they were using what they knew and the technology that they had at the time to try to understand, what their world was and what was happening. And when they looked up in the sky and they saw things moving around and they saw things of different colors and that weren't in the same place all the time, this had very significant meaning to them. And it makes sense that they would relate it to their religious understanding of the world, to their concept of God and how God interacts with us as human beings, because that really informed a lot of what was happening. So these 7 are the eyes of God, which range through the whole earth. So we're talking about things that we see, right, looking down on us. So we're taking text, the eyes of God are watching us from a distance. And we're talking about things that range through the whole earth that we can see everywhere. And then the poet Yanai really brings it home, and he makes the connection explicit for us. And he writes, Menorat Shiva Nerot Mata, Nidmu L'Shivat Mazlot Mala. The 7 lamps of the menorah below are like the 7 constellations or planets above. So in this picture that we see here, we have the 7 classical planets. So these are the celestial bodies that are visible to the naked eye. So this is what our ancestors, these ancients, as Fine calls them, were able to see, when they looked in the sky. And we know that planets are not always visible. They're not always in the same place. Some of them are going to look like they're going to have different colors than typical stars, and they gained a significance to our ancestors. And so it makes sense that they would find ways, like I was saying, find aspects of our Jewish tradition, places where we can connect them to things that are familiar to us and things that we know and things that can add significance to the rituals and the customs and the artifacts that we have with us all the time. So this is something that, that we're seeing here. The menorah, the 7-branched menorah, some ancient Jewish thinkers saw the connection between the 7 eyes of God, these 7 classical planets, and the 7 branches of the menorah, and bringing these eyes of God into the tabernacle and into the temple had a lot of significance, because we were bringing God's presence even closer into these holy spaces. We at Anshai Torah are doing the exact same thing. So this is the image of the artwork that's going to be up in our shul. We will have 2 of these menorahs that look just like this, like Marcy was saying, adorning our walls. And if we think about our sanctuary, and where we sit in that sanctuary, we are always looking at the ark, at the Aron Kodesh. And what does it say on top of it? It says, Da lifnei mi ata omed. Know who you're standing in front of. So we already have this this kind of thought process when we walk into the sanctuary, into these holy spaces, where we should be cognizant of where we are and what we're doing. And what we're doing this in front of, that we are standing in the presence of God, and we are sharing our souls with God, sharing our prayers with God. And it is so fitting to have a menorah in our sanctuary, because it's just another representation of God's presence, of God looking at us, watching us. So we have this kind of reciprocal relationship, if we think about it, in our sanctuary now, where we're thinking about who we're looking at when we pray, but we'll also have these images of the menorah representing God looking at us as we pray. So I see that there are some questions, and I do want to open it up to questions. So I'm just going to read the questions that I have in the chat, and then feel free to either keep chatting them out or raise a hand if anything comes up. So one is it called a shamash in the middle of the menorah and the Chanukiah? So no, not in the menorah. It's not called a shamash. It's just one of the branches. And then Sylvia says the sun is not a planet, though. Well, when you're talking about these classical planets, if you look that up, the sun is included in what they were calling a classical planet. So they included the moon in that too. And really, it's not just thinking about a planet, but more celestial bodies that you could see with the naked eye. So that's why the sun is included. Any other questions? I'm just going to scroll through and see if I see any hands. Okay, so So I just do want to say, first of all, I want to thank you all for being here, being part of this, and learning with me and learning all together. I hope that it just sheds a little bit more light on some of these super familiar artifacts. And when we come into the sanctuary, when we're finally able to be together and we walk into our sanctuary and these menorahs will already be up there waiting for us, I hope that we'll come in with more of a heightened understanding of what it symbolizes and some of the history behind it. And I hope that you can join us next week for the people of the menorah. There'll be another one. That one will be repeated in the beginning of March as well. And I do just want to thank my husband for helping with the names of these sessions. He has been on a roll naming things the past couple of months. So I was asking him for some help naming them, and he came up with this 7, 8, 9, which I thought was super cute. You know, if we're thinking about the menorah compared to the Chanukiah, which was a distinction that I definitely wanted everybody to walk away with. So I want to thank Michael for that. And I want to thank you for your time. And I'm going to hand it back over to Marcy to close us out.
I actually had a question, and that was, I don't think these menorahs will have lights on them, actual lights, but would they or should they have lights on them? And if they did, do we keep them lit all the time like a Ner Tamid? Is there any?
Well, something that Fine writes about in his book, in talking about why so many sanctuaries throughout history have a menorah in them, is the menorah has kind of been replaced in certain ways by the Ner Tamid.
Oh,
so the temples had them; they were always lit, and they were kind of like the eternal flame element. There has been a lot of kind of debate over the years of whether or not to have an actual menorah in a sanctuary or just a rendering of the menorah. You know, since we don't have the temple anymore, do we actually have the actual menorah? So I think that the menorah's light was replaced by the Ner Tamid when it was kind of more controversial than it is now about having like an actual physical menorah in the sanctuary.
so ours will be, I mean, they won't be freestanding. They're going to be 3-dimensional, but on the wall. They'll be on the walls, on the 2 walls, and they'll be lit in a way to highlight art as opposed to any sort of ritual object. They don't have anything to do with Hanukkah, so we're not going to be.
Right. There is no ritual lighting of the menorah.
Okay.
And in any way.
Okay.
It really
it's a symbol.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I had to walk away for 1 second, but sorry, I do apologize if you did say something about this, but how the menorah, I know the menorah versus the Hanukkah, is there any correlation between the two? Meaning, like, how did the Hanukkah
Oh, that's a good question.
you know what I'm saying? I know it's got, the 8, and it represents the 8 days and the single, but why is it so similar is the question. Were they taking from the past to,
I think bottom line is that they're both candelabras. And, there's a lot of, like we were saying, a lot of interpretations about what the menorah actually looked like. If the branches were curved, if they were straight. But I think that probably that's just what a candelabra with different branches looked like at the time. And I think, the picture that I had there of the 8 that looks similar to the menorah, the 7-branched menorah. Obviously now, when you get a Chanukiah, it can look like anything, right? We have all different kinds of shapes and sizes. I think that probably is just a very traditional picture of what a candelabra looked like.
Fantastic.
Thank
Anybody have any other questions for our Rebbitzin? Well, you
Yeah.
know, don't be shy.
Debbie, Kahn.
Yeah. Oh, wait, did you unmute me?
Mhm.
Okay. Hi. Wonderful. You're such a great speaker. Is there any reason they have to be in a line? Because, I mean, you could have a candelabra that's just, you know, some going this way and some going this way, like, as opposed to just all on one plane.
No, I don't think there is. I mean, I think that this is just, you know, the interpretation based on the text, that there would be one in the middle and then, you know, 6 coming out of it. But we're actually not going to be talking about this. It was one of the things that we were going to maybe talk about, but because there's so much to talk about when you're thinking about the menorah. But like through the research that I did, there are just so many renderings of what this biblical menorah actually looked like. And, you know, from very famous commentators, and a lot of them interpret it differently and have drawn it kind of differently based on what they interpreted when they were reading the text. So yeah, I mean, I guess it could have looked a lot of different ways. One of the things, and I don't really want to get so into it, but one of the reasons that we kind of have an image in our mind of the menorah looking the way that it does is because of the Arch of Titus and the menorah that's on the Arch of Titus, which has kind of become like the most, I don't know, well-recognized image of the biblical menorah, of the, you know, the menorah from the temples. And next week, in the People of the Menorah session, we're going to get really into the Arch of Titus and talking about that representation. But that one is really the one that is kind of stuck in the minds of people when they're thinking about what the temple menorah looked like. So I think all of the traditional renderings that have come since then kind of look like that one. If that answers your question.
Any other questions? Well, I want to thank everybody for participating. These menorahs that are going to go on the walls of our Behringer sanctuary are far from traditional. They are fairly whimsical. When you see them up close and personal, you will all want to redo your bathrooms because the glass tile is just beautiful. It's just beautiful. And Jeanette's been working with Nancy Stanley to just create a color palette that is going to work in our sanctuary, and they are going to be quite lovely. And oh, Lauren.
So I have to share something only because Marcy Kahn just put a note in here. So as we were talking, I realized I actually have that Haggadah.
Oh, cool.
And the end of her note is it's worth a fortune on Amazon. The reason I was chuckling is that I bought this at a used bookshop in Denton a couple of years ago. We were just walking around. Denton there's this little used bookshop that has a really nice Judaica section. I bought it for $15.
It's like $1,000 on Amazon.
Oh my gosh.
Can you show us the menorah in there?
Where's the menorah?
Yeah.
Where's the menorah in it?
It's actually right at the beginning. It's very easy to find.
Yeah, it's like $1,000 on Amazon.
Well,
Wow.
I'm very
Wow.
happy to note that it's one of the few I haven't spilt any wine in.
You got to show the rabbi that. That's amazing.
That's crazy.
That's crazy. Well, good for you. You've got a piece. You've got a piece.
That's funny. Thank you.
Good
And
for you. Good
I
for
also
you.
just want to add for those of you who were not aware that we did the sessions for the kids in December, but part of their sessions was that they actually made their own menorahs using the same colors that we're going to be having in ours. The little kids took tissue paper and made one with tissue paper, sticking it onto sticky contact paper. And the older kids made a beaded menorah using beads that were similar colors and wire, and made one that looked very similar to it. So our kids have, spent a lot of time kind of really thinking about what this menorah that we're going to have up in our sanctuary looks like. And we actually have ours, hanging on our wall. And they came out really, really nicely. And so we should hang up like all the kids' ones around when we first put them up so they can see.
We should.
But that was a really fun thing that we did back in December.
Well, Talia, thank you so much for taking the lead on these education sessions, which so far so good. I think they're vital to engaging our congregation. I appreciate that everyone took some time out of their evening. I know we're all having terrible Zoom fatigue, and we're all just craving to hug one another and be in our shul and have things go back to normal. I live with Dr. Doomsday, so I just can't say when that's going to happen, but I'm hoping in the spring it'll look something more normal and we can get together. And for sure, next fall, we will have a beautiful dedication, and we'll all gather in the sanctuary and dedicate these menorahs and sing and dance. And while we may be masked, we're likely to be able to touch one another. So anyway, if anybody has any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Go online if you're so inspired to participate. And again, thank you for those who have already. We really appreciate your support of the shul. Thank you. A big round of applause for Talia.
Thank you so much.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.